Hey, good afternoon. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Making sure this is all going. And welcome to this live stream. Yeah, I told you we're going to do a live stream here. It is about 3:44 p.m. Pacific time as we're doing this. Beforehand, I just did a package opening. You'll probably see that afterwards and everything. But it's a package from Frankio, and you'll see exactly what those are when the video goes up there. But until then, guys, I'd like to ask you all to do me a solid favor, and that's like the video, ring the bell, or like the live stream, I should say, like the live stream, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the live stream. Also, ladies and gentlemen, please go to the description and the YouTube homepage afterwards. That is, but go to the I guess you could say the description, trying to find the right way to say this. And you can click on links to find my content also outside of YouTube. You can find me at all your favorite audio and video podcast platforms. You can find me at iTunes, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify. Okay, let me do that, guys. I'm getting a little brain party here, you know. But like I said, you can find me at all your other favorite podcast platforms like iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, Audible, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and to an extent SiriusXM, and maybe due to the partnership now with Spotify, potentially in the near future, Netflix. Also, ladies and gentlemen, you can find me at other video platforms. You can find me at Rumble, Odyssey, Dailymotion, and VENMO. You can also find me at patreon.com. I will get that up and running real soon once again. That'll basically be like how I started late last year. Will be to the point that you'll see content there 24 to 48 hours before it shows up on YouTube or any of the other video platforms, depending on whether or not I feel it might, pass or not pass the YouTube policy algorithms and stuff like that. Also, ladies and gentlemen, you can help me out through Venmo and Cash App. That helps me out directly if you want to go that route. Also, ladies and gentlemen, you can find me on other other creative sites, I should say, like DeviantArt at BVW1979, for Affinity at BW1979, and at inkbunny.net at BWRoses. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I have a couple of online stores, the Fourth Wall Store and a Teespring store. Links are in the description. Fourth Wall Store is in the middle. Fourth Wall Store link, I should say, is in the middle of the description, and Teespring store link is near the bottom. Also, I will have affiliated stores. When this is all said and done, I will have affiliated stores listed, so you guys can check those out. It helps me out tremendously. Whatever you might be interested in, what you get helps me out in return with commissions. Also, ladies and gentlemen, you can find me at other social media outlets like Twitter, TikTok, and Blue Sky, all under the BW Roses username. Also, ladies and gentlemen, during this live stream, the live chat is going to be open, so please chime on your thoughts in there if you want to get your thoughts in on what I have to say here. It'd be greatly appreciated. And also, super chats are on, ladies and gentlemen. You want to get those super chats on in, along with your thoughts. It helps me on whatever you can do. It would be greatly, greatly appreciated. So go ahead and super chat if you would like. And the comment section will be open on both this occasion and afterwards, even as it's rendering throughout the next 12 hours after it's done. And the super thanks will be open after that time frame as well. So if you still want to donate through the super thanks, go ahead and do so. Now, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the topic at hand. And first of all, let me make sure everything is working, appropriately here. Let me get the volume back up on my soundbar. The soundbar always seems to like to go off a little bit if you're not using it for a bit. So, I just got to make sure everything's up and running appropriately and stuff before we get into talking about some of the things. But you can see in the description exactly what we're going to be talking about and everything as we motor along here on this live stream, if you will. So again, let me make sure everything is, up and running the way it should be. And it looks like we are live. So let me go here. And there's a advertisement. So hold on. Okay, so there we go. Yeah, it is working. Just making sure. Just making sure it's working, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to go on my phone here to share this stuff as well. But the topics we're going to talk about, of course, are as described in the description. We're going to talk about the infamous Archie Sonic issue 150, which this summer is going to celebrate 21 years. Yes, it'll be old enough to drink because last summer was 20 years of its existence, 20 years since that issue came out and the infamous moment in there occurred. Also, we're going to talk about some of the upcoming Sonic movies, multi-universe movies and stuff like that they have planned. And we're going to also talk about and respond to Cyberpunk Jordan's recent video on Archie Sonic Forever, which was one of the fan continuations of the Archie Sonic book pre-reboot, if you will. So we're going to talk about that as well, as well as some other things as well. So with that said, and let me get this all set up and everything. With that said, first of all, again, live chat is open and super chats are on as well. So you guys want to come on in here with your super chats, along with whatever you, along with your thoughts on what we have talked about here. Please go ahead and do so. It would be greatly appreciated in the long run. Now, let's get on to the first topic, of course, that being the infamous, if you will. Let me make sure I got all this. Hold on. That's the infamous issue 150. As I'm going to try to link this up as best I can, ladies and gentlemen. But the infamous Sonic 150. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go to Facebook. I don't want people on there to see that. But the infamous Archie Sonic 150, which the reason it's infamous, ladies and gentlemen, is due to the fact of one moment. And that one moment is this. I got this off Reddit, because there is a Reddit group on there. And it is this moment right here. It's this moment. I don't know if you can see that well. But yeah, it is that moment. And the reason that moment has made the issue so infamous and everything is due to the fact that for a lot of us, when we first read that issue, and I've talked about it, Cyberpunk Jordan's talked about it, HS Squids talked about it, and everything, and just about anybody that's YouTubed, podcasted, and even just essayed here online, the thoughts on it. Everybody, when they first read that issue, thought that this was Sonic from the get-go. But then we started seeing him acting strange. Like, okay, why is he wanting to be on the rebound with not just Mina, knowing she's in a relationship with Ash, who was her boyfriend, another mongoose, if you will, and then all of a sudden wanted to hit on Amy, who he's tried to avoid because Amy wants to go beyond to just being friends. She wants to really take it to that other level in these incarnations of her, and then all of a sudden, get it on, kind of, make out with Bunny, and as some people have pointed out, get it on with her and everything. A lot of us were wondering that, and then it's only after Bunny leaves that we find out that this Sonic is not the legit Sonic. That instead it's evil Sonic, who would later on go on to be known as Scourge, and that all he wanted to do was just reap the rewards of being his good, being the basically being in the disguise of his good doppelganger and all that, basically living the good life, and essentially doing what he feels his goody two counterpart should have been doing. That's, hey, you're the hero around here. Bask in the glory. Take advantage of it. Get all the free stuff you want. Get all the women you want, and everything. And that's what he's doing here. But the reason, though, that panel from that panel right there makes this kind of infamous, if you will. The reason it makes it infamous, if you will, is due to the fact that essentially that is looked at as one person put it on the Reddit post, S-A-ing. I'm not going to say the word. I'm not going to say the two words, but S-A-ing. That's S-A, comma, I-N-G, if you know what I mean. No, not comma, but a parentheses or whatever it is, a parentheses or whatever, hyphen, if you will, S-A hyphen I-N-G. We'll put it that way. That's how people, look at it. They looked at it, in that manner because, he was essentially pretending to be somebody he's not, and he had essentially done something to Bunny, even though Bunny wasn't, sure, at that time exactly who this individual was. She was just going along with the fact that she thought it was Sonic, and everything. But the clues should have been in there, to a lot of people. The clues should have been there to her. That why would Sonic want to suddenly, go to town, as some people put it or described it, and that is a good question. That is a definitely a good question to wonder and everything. That is a good question to wonder and everything, if you will. That's what made the issue so infamous. The fact that why would Ken Penders, and that was the person who wrote the story, why would he go this route? Why would he do this? And I talked about one time that I think the reason Penders went in the direction he did, after he took back control, basically took back the head writing jobs from Carl Bowlers, the reason he wanted to go these routes is he wanted the comic to grow up with the readers. The readers were getting older and everything, and he wanted the readers, or he wanted the comic book to, to grow up with them. He wanted them to, essentially have, have something that isn't going to remain in the same, if you will, the same. What's the one I'm looking at? The same stratosphere, as it was, when it first began. He wanted it to grow. He wanted it to mature. That's the only reason I think he went these routes. He wanted the comic to mature and be more than what was being presented and everything. And that's what he got. That's what he got and everything, with some of these stories, or at least he attempted to get, with some of these stories. He wanted to go that route. He wanted to make mature stories to where if he was ever asked the question of why did you do this, why did you go that route, and everything, that he could be justified in his response, because the response he gave to Sonic Blue Ranger on social media, the response he gave just really wasn't the response people wanted. It wasn't. It wasn't the response people wanted, due to the fact, like, wait a minute, how can you justify that? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you, go out and justify something that, basically, from this image is not what it seems? Because basically, his excuse, his reasoning for it is that, and I think I have it on here. Yeah, I do. I do have some of it on here. Let me double check. And yeah, there's some of them right here, because Dustin Phillips, who is Sonic Blue Ranger on social media, basically, basically talked about, or basically asked Penders, how, what would Antoine think? Because Antoine and Bunny, were together at that time. They were together, at that time frame, as an item. They were together. They were happily together, stuff like that. And even though her and Antoine, quote unquote, broke up at that time, and again, this is something that none of us really knew about, that the Antoine that broke up with her was another evil doppelganger from Muebis, which is the alternate evil, which is the alternate name of Mobius, that, the universe's name for the planet. She didn't know that that was evil Sonic Patch, as he would become known, that was posing as Antoine and everything, and had broken up with her. So it was basically, again, we had no, we had no idea, whatsoever, that what we were seeing, here was all basically, a farce. What we were seeing in the story with Antoine being the way he was, and now Sonic in 150 acting the way he was nothing but a farce and everything. And for Ken to come out, and say what he did by indicating, oh, Bunny, Bunny basically admitting to Antoine, what she did, her transgression and everything, that basically his response is, Antoine is too much of a gentleman to hold that against her. And it's like, what are you talking? And it's like, people are like, when they read this, when they read this part and everything, that where he said Antoine is too much of a romantic, he could forgive just about any transgressions Bunny committed. It's like when people read that part, they're like, Ken, what are you talking about? What do you mean transgressions? she was taking advantage of. She was taken advantage of due to the fact that she thought not only that had Antoine broken up with her, but she thought that the one other male that was interested in her and her, in extent, interested in him, even when she was with Antoine, was finally showing that interest, and she wanted to return it, not knowing that that was not who she thought it was. So by basically making up that making up that excuse, as some people put it, it's Ken's way of saying it's Ken's way of avoiding of avoiding giving the real answer of, yeah, what Evil did here is take advantage, and he SA'd her, he SA'd her, if you will, Bunny, and it's like basically if Ken would have just given that answer, if Ken would have just given that answer, if you will, then I don't think anybody would have anything to say about it. I don't think anybody would have anything, bad to say about it, because at least he'd be, or not be one. Well, they wouldn't have nothing. Well, they would have stuff. Stuff. I'm getting tongue tied here. Let me get some coffee. Hold on. I mean, yeah, they would have, some bad stuff to say about it. Don't get me wrong. They would. They would have some bad stuff to say about it. But still, it's along the line. It's along the lines, basically, of it wouldn't. Ken wouldn't be getting criticized. Let me put it that way. Ken would not be getting criticized as much as he got, and has been getting. Anytime somebody brings this up and he gives an answer, if not an answer similar to that, basically, he would not be getting criticized as much had he just come out and admit that, yeah, he took it. This doppelganger of Sonic posing as him took advantage of Bunny, basically basically to an extent SA'd her, without her knowing it or without her realizing it. If he would have just admitted to that, acknowledged that, if you will, then I don't think anybody would be, again, so harsh about it like they are now. But the fact that he put that moment in there, and one of the things that people like Cyberpunk Jordan point out when they were talking about it a couple of years ago, excuse me, and some others have pointed this out too, to an extent, even myself, is that it's not just the dialogue, but it's also the word texture. Because when they make these comics, they take the script and they put it into the speech bubbles, right? Well, a lot of people say that the speech bubbles here have some kind of a different font. They have somewhat of a different font here. Now, and I want you to look at that real quick. I don't know if you can see that real well, but the font, you can tell, and I do apologize for the print quality. I ran low on ink a little bit, or was running low on ink. But the print, you can see that the text quality, is kind of different, right? And essentially, what the reason a lot of people point that out, the reason people like Jordan and others point that out, is because that probably wasn't the original intended dialogue, or and all that. It was supposed to probably indicate something else. And also, the reason people feel that this moment was more than what it seemed, if you will, from an adult perspective, is the visuals. Is the visuals themselves. As you can see, I mean, look how evil Sonic, as he's posing as Sonic, is winking, like he's breaking the fourth wall, winking to the audience. And the Cyberpunk Jordan puts it, kind of acknowledging that, hey, I just scored, I just did the deed. You know what I'm saying? It's like why put all that in there? Like why put all those moments in there and everything, and not expect people to think otherwise, especially later on. And you got to wonder what younger readers at that time too, were probably thinking. They're probably thinking, reading this, what is going on? Asking their parents, and their parents probably seeing this, going like, they didn't put that in there, did they? They didn't write that moment in there, did they? They couldn't have allowed this. This has to be a mistake. And then when they find out later on that it wasn't, you got to wonder what they were thinking. And they're probably now grandparents that are probably, talking to their kids who are now parents themselves, or at least in college, that are still fans that might go back and read an issue here and there. I mean, I have issues right over here, packed away. I mean, put into a lot of binders. But you got to wonder how parents, at that time, were feeling about this. And even if the kids are still fans, even as parents themselves, and they go back and occasionally read the issues, you know, you got to wonder if they talk about it sometimes, going like, "Hey, what'd you do today? Oh, what'd you do today, son? Oh, I just relaxed, Dad. Just went back and reread my old Sonic comics, and yeah, and you can imagine the father asking, "Well, what issues did you read?" And the son going like, "Oh, one of the issues I read was that 150 issue. You know, the one with that infamous scene that indicated the that Sonic and his friend Bunny did the deed, but it wasn't really Sonic that did the deed with her and stuff like that." Can you? It's like, can you imagine the conversation now at a more adult level, to where the father, now a grandparent, asking the son, potentially, just hypothetically asking him, "Man, why did they even put that in there? Why did they even put that scene in there? Do they think young kids at that time, like you were when it first came out, were going to understand that?" You know, it's one of those situations, ladies and gentlemen. It's just one of those situations to where, when you look at the issue, and you look at this one moment here, it it just boggles the mind. It just boggles the mind that they did that, and not expect people to, not just young kids, but maybe teens and adult and college students that were reading the comic, subscribing to the comic, and being fans of it. Did they not think at that time, 20 years ago, going on 21 years this summer, did they not think that people would think along those lines of, wait a minute, are they implying that they did what I think they did? That it's just one of those it's just one of those situations that really blows your mind, if you will. And then on top of that, you look at the fact that he was flirting with Mina, and Mina had to turn it back because she didn't want to ruin the thing with Ash and all that, her boyfriend, and probably something in her mind is making her wonder. This can't, this is not Sonic. Why would he suddenly hit on me after all this time? And then Amy Rose, and here's the thing about Amy Rose's character in the book. Here's her thing about her character in the book pre-reboot. Her character is the same age as Tails. The only reason she looks the way she did, as a lot of people have talked about, and I've talked about recently, is back in issue 79 and issue 80, she used the Ring of Acorns, a magical MacGuffin, if you will, to grant wishes and maybe heal people or heal individuals. She used it to age herself up to her Sonic Adventure design. And yeah, it was mostly done to coincide with the game where her design debuted, but it was done in a way, but it was done storyline wise because she didn't she was upset at the fact that she wasn't able to go with them initially to Station Square on their mission and all that. And a lot of people criticized her for that moment, for the fact that she was being, kind of selfish, and and not really thinking about the consequences, of her actions. Not really thinking about it, because Elias, at that time, Sally's brother, was going to use it to potentially heal his mom, heal their mom, who was in cryogenic state at that time, kind of a coma cryogenic state, to kind of heal her, wake her up, and bring her back to the family. But Amy beat him to the ring, to make her wish happen, because she wanted to go, she wanted to find a way to go with them, as well as basically, as some people put it, and even I kind of look at it, just find another way to get Sonic to be with her. But as basically solidified in that in that same issue, on that following issue where her design debuted, and then later on in the future issues, side stories, if you will, it still indicated that even though she aged herself up, she's physically aged herself up, she is still the same age mentally, as Tails. She is still Tails' age. And basically, when you put that into the equation, you put that into the put that into the spectrum, if you will, you kind of say to yourself, so wait a minute, or not say to yourself, you kind of ask yourself and then realize to yourself, well, wait a minute. So he was hitting on this mongoose who used to be interested in him, still finds him attractive, but now has somebody else, and probably is thinking, wait a minute, what am I doing? Why is Sonic doing this? Could this really be Sonic and all that, as he's running off? And then the next one he hits on is, physically his age, but is mentally and actually 8 to 10 years old. It's like basically if they pulled that with Cream, if you will, Cream the Rabbit, and had that happen there. It'd be like, what is going on here, right? It's like, are you nuts? Are you? It's like, what are you thinking? Because again, Amy, actuality in the pre-reboot, actuality-wise, is the same age as Sonic. I mean, same age as Tails. She is not, the age of Sonic. Physically, she is. Same age, she's not. And so that's kind of like weird in its own right for him, for Evil Sonic, for them to have the doppelganger, Evil Sonic, to do that. It's weird. And for those of you coming on in, live chat is open and super chats are open as well. So if you want to get those live chats and super chats in, guys, it'd be greatly appreciated, whatever you can do. And comments will be open on both sides, comment section that is. But super chats are open, guys. Get those on in, and live chat is in. Get your thoughts in as well. But anyway, it's like, but anyway, like I said, you gotta think to yourself, well, wait a minute, So he was hitting on this mongoose who now has a boyfriend, and probably running off and thinking, I can't do that to Ash. And wait a minute, is this really Sonic? Because why is suddenly Sonic hitting on me? Like, he wants to do the thing, get together, do the thing. And then he goes and hits on someone that, like I said, physically is the same age, but actuality, it's still the age of Tails. And it's still the age of Tails, 8 to 10 years old. It's like, Ken, what are you thinking, right? And then you go off and then you go and you do this thing right here, with Bunny, and that kind of makes sense, because even though Bunny at times could be described as being about the same age as Sonic, maybe a year older than Sonic, 2 years older, whatever the case may be, it's still more appropriate than doing what they did, if you will, with Amy. And then you lead to that moment, and it's like, again, Ken, what are you thinking? Like, what was going through his mindset? And like I said earlier, I think he wanted to basically get the comic to age up with the fans. Get it to age up with the fans, and everything, to the point. To the point basically that had it continued, the stories probably now would have been a lot more mature. It would still have been lighthearted, because that's where the post reboot was going. It's going to be more game related and a little bit more lighthearted at times as well. But it felt like basically Ken's idea was grow the comic up along with the fans, so that when it gets to a point like now, the stories could be more mature, more acceptable, and more of more on a level to where he could potentially get away with maybe putting in certain scenes that you wouldn't think he'd be able to, that he basically, excuse me, would be able to put in there beforehand. So yeah, it's just crazy to think that this moment, this moment here is now 20. It's going to be 20. It's going to be old enough to drink this summer. Turned 20 last summer, and it's going to be old enough to drink this summer. It's hard to believe this moment right here is going to get that old. And basically, Ken's response, like I said, didn't really sit well, and it still doesn't sit well with people, because basically, you have, you have, people like this person on Reddit with the F Ken Penders tagline or headliner, if you will. This is what they said, and I quote, and this is by, let me see, what is that? What is that name? Hold on, probably a comedy name. Hold on, guys. Let me turn on my light. Oops, I don't want to do that. Let me turn on my light here. Oh, the name is, I'm not going to say it, but we'll just call them we're going to call them AA FM. But they basically said, the thing was explaining the panel from Archie Sonic 150, and basically they described exactly what goes on beforehand. Sonic, evil Sonic, posing as Sonic, saves a chili dog stand from a SWAT bot in a village, and all that, is hailed a hero. Then he goes on to try to hit on Mina, which Mino refuses so that it wouldn't interfere with her relationship with her current boyfriend Ash. Again, another mongoose. And then after that, he flirts with Amy and leaves. And here's the thing: again, Amy, he's flirting with essentially someone that physically is the same age, but actuality is younger by at least several years. Now, then after that, it states that Tails, who's looking for Sonic, getting tongue tied there. The way they word this sometimes, you got to wonder. It says it does describe that Tails then goes to look for Sonic and only finds him when he's making out with Bunny. And then of course Tails is not happy about it. Bunny asks who she thinks is Sonic if they should console him, but Sonic, evil Sonic, who's posing as Sonic, thinks he'll get over it, or says he's going to get over it. But then several hours later, him and Bunny are waking up from a nap. And here's the thing: what's interesting, because the panel before that, when Bunny's asking if he's okay and everything, and if they should go after him, and then evil Sonic posing as Sonic says, "Oh, he'll get over it," and then he says, "Let's just get back down to business." And he wants to go back in for a kiss, and Bunny's like, "Are you okay?" And you would think Bunny right there would push off and say, "Hey, we should go talk to Tails first," but that didn't happen. And basically, we can assume he just ended up kissing her, and she just went in with it. It's like the moment he went for a kiss on her, and she's trying to ask if you're okay, he just basically smooched her. And let's just say because of the state of mind she was in at that time, because she thought Antoine had broken up with her, she just went along with it. Like instead of pushing off, she just went with it. And the next thing we know, we get this moment. We get this moment and everything, because it says several hours later, Bunny and Sonic go their separate ways and head home for the night. Now they do ask this. AAFM does ask this. They say, "Now you're asking yourself, that's not all that bad, right?" Wrong, because that wasn't actually Sonic. It was his alternate universe counterpart, Evil Sonic. This was prior to him becoming Scourge, but it's mainly the same character. Now they do go on to talk about why the reasoning for this, basically stating that what happened here was the equivalent of SA apostrophes ing. But then they bring up the screenshots of Dustin Phillips, communicating with Ken Penders about the situation, because even Dustin Phillips, aka the Sonic Blue Ranger on social media, even they felt that this basically was very awkward. Like, it's like, again, what was Ken thinking? Because here, he's wondering about the whole situation. And he's like, one of the things, I didn't get the whole thing here, but it says, I mean, obviously Ant would look past that moment, but still that controversy, but still that what I'm trying to, I don't know why I'm having trouble reading this, but one of the things he says is, I mean, obviously Antoine would look past that moment, but still that conversation had to come up, right? Because again, you don't just get back together, with the love of your life, which he does, because Sonic is able to deduce that the Antoine that's about to marry marry Sally, because Sally's dad is fallen ill, and he's fallen ill because of Antoine Patch poisoning him. And Sonic finds out the truth about him and all that. And exposes him to the exposes him to the world. And goes to Moebius, gets the real Antoine in exchange for the false Antoine. So yeah, even though they hooked back up, they got back together. That is a good question to ask. That expansion, from an expanded storytelling perspective, you have to wonder if that conversation came up. If Antoine did ask Bunny, did you do anything behind my back when I was away? And Bunny probably being awkwardly, careful about acknowledging that yes, he kind of did, but she thought it was Sonic and not the other Sonic. If you get what I'm saying. So that could have been it. That could have been it. And Ken's response on both occasions was, "That's something a gentleman wouldn't ask a lady or expect her to answer." And then basically another one, "Antoine is too much of a romantic. He could forgive just about any transgression Bunny committed." And again, everybody points out H Squids, Cyberpunk Jordan, everybody that's talked about this has said, what transgression? She was taken advantage of because she didn't know better. She didn't know that this Sonic was not the real Sonic. And then the AAFM says, first of all, Bunny being SAD'd isn't her fault. That's evil Sonic's because he knew full well on what the hell to do during. Oh, okay. Let me read that. The response is, first of all, Bunny being taken advantage of, that's evil Sonic's fault because he knew full well on what the hell he was doing. Well, Bunny had no clue that he wasn't Sonic. Second, and then they say this, Ken Penders is a blank, if you know what I mean. And finally, here's another post that Ken made about that's equally two way more disgusting. And then the post he brings up here is another idea that Ken wanted to do, if you will. Ken wanted to try to go with, but obviously, thank God, Archie Comics and even Sega, by extension, shot it down. He said, the one story I couldn't tell was Sally losing her virginity to Jeffrey. Sonic may be fast, but Jeffrey was faster on the draw in that department. And it's literally right there. And it's like, and again, these are the responses too. Look. But literally, you read that and you're like, and everybody that's talked about this infamous 150 post has brought that up too. And they keep wondering, Ken, what are you thinking? Like, why would you even consider that as a possibility, as a reasoning? It doesn't make any sense. It's like, are you forgetting that you're not working on a DC comic? Because obviously, when he was working at DC Comics and some other places, he was working on more mature, more, I wouldn't say adult-like, but more mature stories for, characters and teams like the Justice League, Captain Atom, and Spider-Man, and all of them, X-Men, Superman, Batman, you name it. He was working on different stories and all that. He was. They were more mature in tone. So did he forget that? Oh, this is a all ages comic and mostly targeted to a younger audience at times. So it's right in the middle, and that he can't go in that direction because apparently it seems like he did forget that. It seems like he did forget that. When doing what he did here was 150, if you will, and the response he gave people years later, and then mentioning what he wanted to plan, what his plan initially was for Sally and Jeffrey, and it's like again, it's like again, you ask yourself, Ken, did you forget you're working on an all ages comic and not a comic meant for an older audience? It's like what was going through his mind is you have to wonder. You have to wonder what was going through his mind. And again, I think, like I said earlier, and I've said this before multiple times in other videos, audio and on camera, I think what was going through his mind, was the fact that he wanted this comic to be older. He wanted it to grow up with the audience, so that way they, in his mind, the comic wouldn't lose any subscribers. They wouldn't lose, any fans, once they got older, because the comic would have aged with them. And and look, that's a good idea. I mean, a lot of comics do that. A lot of people working on comics, a lot of publishers, that they will allow that to happen, so that way they don't lose any potential, customers in the near future. But still, this is like, what is that? It's like, what are you thinking, Ken? It's like, what is going through that mind of yours, if you will, and not realizing that, yeah, it's a good, and you have good intentions in that department, but this isn't like any of those other comic books that you've worked on with other publishers. This is an all ages comic. And if you think Sega is going to be like, okay, Ken, go ahead and do that, then you're not thinking straight. You're not. But yeah, in closing with this subject, it's just hard to believe that this one controversial moment is going to be old enough to drink this summer. And it's still one of the biggest moments, not just in Sonic comic history, but potentially the overall Sonic franchise history that people talk about the most, outside of other things, if you know what I mean. But let me know what your thoughts are on it in the live chat if you'd like to, as well as in the comments afterwards. If not during the live chat, let me know what your guys' thoughts are. And again, guys, super chats are on if you want to get those on in, and the live chat is open. So get your thoughts in as well when it concerns these topics. But now, on to the next topic here, and that is Sonic movies. Now, a year from next month, basically 13 months from now, Sonic 4 will be hitting theaters, and it will have Amy Rose. And there's been many discussions of what the concept of it will be. Some have said that the plot will have somewhat of a kind of cute, romantic plot when it comes to Amy and Sonic and everything and so on. And some are even thinking about the fact that it could potentially also take place in the future. And the reason for that is because Sonic racing so fast that he basically broke the time barrier and he ended up in the future instead of remaining in the present. When it came to the end of the last film. And of course, there's news that Jim Carrey could return as Dr. Robotnik slash Eggman, because there is concept art of him basically ruling in the future alongside several Metal Sonics, at his disposal. So there's that discussion, and honestly, I'm looking forward to it when it comes out because it's going to be interesting to see not only if Jim Carrey does come back and everything and takes on that role again, and how it's going to be played, if you will, because I think there's even speculation that it will have a bit of a romantic kind of rom-com feel to it, but it'll also have like a bit of a darker tone. Like the tone will be a little bit darker, but it'll also have that rom-com feel as well. And one can only imagine exactly how this all pieces together. We still don't know who they're going to have voice Amy Rose. Some are thinking it's going to be Amy Poehler because again, same name as the character. That might be someone they get. Some are probably looking at Ariana Grande as her voice because if they need her to sing, there you go. So there's a lot of choices. Some are thinking Zendaya, maybe, and I know people don't want to hear that, but hey, that might be a choice they go with. So we'll see what they do. It'll be interesting when they make that announcement. I think that announcement will probably come around. I would say it's going to come around San Diego Comic Con, maybe one of the next upcoming Sonic conventions, expos, if you will. I think we'll get more of an idea then. But we also got news that afterwards, in the following year, we're going to get a Sonic Universe movie. Now, it's not going to be based off the Universe comic, obviously, but the idea that it's going to be called, the title is not called Sonic Universe. It's just, that's a working title for it, but it's a Sonic Universe film. And it's coming out a year after, when it usually takes about a few years for a sequel to remain. This is basically a spin-off on its own thing. It makes you wonder exactly what it's going to be about, because you would think that if Sonic 4 is coming out next year and then you got this other movie coming out, it makes you think, is this going to tie in somehow? Is Sonic 4 going to tie in to the movie, and exactly who's going to be in universe? Who's going to be in the universe movie? Now, I know there's certain characters people want in there, like, Sally and the Freedom Fighters, Bunny and all them. That's cool. I want to see that too. I mean, heck, if there's anything, Nano Banana Pro, the AI, Google's AI image generator has proven, if there's anything it's proven, is that when you take a picture of one of those characters and you say in the prompt, create it in a live action cinematic Sonic style, the end result is actually pretty good, because as a lot of you have seen here on my channel, you basically get essentially what we might be seeing on the big screen in the future. So if there's anything that's proven, is that little AI tool is proven is, yes, it is indeed possible, but it's up to the people in charge. It's up to the party in charge, if you know what I mean. But honestly, when it comes to who could be in the movie, whether it ties into 4 or not, it's going to be interesting, because if we do get a glimpse, maybe a hint in the 4th movie of what universe could be, I guarantee you, if we hear a voice similar to Cat Sushi's, when it came to a certain character, I'm telling you right now, That theater, and it's in the post-credit scenes or mid to post-credit scenes. I'm telling you right now, the roof on those theaters, IMAX or regular or 4D, is going to be blown off. I'm telling you right there now, well, right here and now, it's going to get blown off, if you will. If they hear in a mid to post credit scene, maybe Amy communicating with somebody, and on the other side we see another female silhouette, and it looks very familiar, and then we hear a voice similar to Katsushi's. Again, the roof on a lot of those theaters is going to be blown off. And if you're watching it at a drive-in, because there are still drive-ins, then the roof of your cars are going to be blown off. Put it that way. Because of the reaction they're going to give. And that I think that would be awesome if that happens. But again, we don't know. Everything's being kept close to the vest, if you will, especially when it comes to the Sonic 4 story and whether or not it ties into Universe or Universe is its own thing. If it's its own thing, that's going to be interesting to see exactly what characters they bring into the equation down the within the film, if you will. It's going to be interesting, who they involve. I mean, obviously they're going to want to involve game characters, of course, like the Chaotix, Rouge, maybe Tangle and Whisper, I should say. Who, by the way, next week on the third episode of the Chaotix Conspiracy Files, we're actually going to finally hear the voices of Tangle and Whisper next week. So that's going to tie into the debut this month in Sonic Cross World Racing, and I think that's what they're waiting for before releasing them. We can hear what they're going to sound like, so that when that way when we do get to play the game, we'll hear what they sound like in the game. So we're going to get the vocal debut of both characters next week. The official vocal debuts apparently, but yeah, it could involve them. Who knows what it's going to involve, but basically they have said they wanted the guy in charge, Jeffrey, I think his name's Jeffrey, I think he wants to dig into all Sonic lore. He wants to bring it all into the equation, or bring it, kind of mix it all together in a melting pot. So so whatever he's got planned for Universe, for this Universe movie, or I should say movies, because I think there's planned to be two of them. Whatever he's got planned, it's going to be interesting to see as time goes on over the next 2 years. Like, we're going to get more information, obviously, in San Diego Comic-Con about the fourth film and everything. Maybe the voice announcement of who Amy's going to be voiced by, and maybe we'll get a title teaser, not footage, but title teaser trailer, if you will, for the Sonic Universe film. But I think that's going to be about it for that. But when it comes to the fourth movie, I think we're going to get the official vocal announcement for Amy, and then we'll probably get like a little snippet here and there, like a little teaser trailer to give us an idea of what we're in store for. But as far as Universe goes, like I said, it could be anything. It could be anything out there that they want to bring in. They might take inspiration from Prime, the Sonic Prime, but we'll see. We'll see what they do. But I'm looking forward to it, over the next 2 years, and to see exactly what the plan is, and again, whether or not Sonic 4 is going to tie into it, or if it's going to be its own individual thing. I also know that they want to do a Shadow spin-off series, and that might be where Rouge debuts, but that's up to them. That's up to them. And again, apparently they're trying to keep everything close to the vest, so that way we don't know too much or find out too much. So I think over time, starting next month, and I think next month is when they're starting filming for the fourth film. So I think starting next month, we'll start seeing like little screenshots and everything, and potentially of the characters, like the model characters, because they still got to give us the model version of Amy. They're probably going to be using the model versions or reworked model versions, if you will, the standees, of Knuckles, Tails, and Sonic, as they've done before, and then they're going to also include Amy into that equation, along with Metal. So we're going to probably start seeing some screenshots of that filming taking place. But again, I think any information like voice-wise, we're going to find out maybe before San Diego Comic-Con or after, or at San Diego Comic-Con, as well as maybe a little teaser. And then I think come San Diego Comic-Con as well, I believe we'll get some kind of title teaser as to what the Universe movie will be. And again, as apparently rumor has it, there's going to be like two Universe ones. This, the 2028 one and maybe 2029 or 2030. But we'll see. And then again, they got plans to do a Shadow series. I think that's been rumored as well. So we'll see what they do with that. And I think Rouge might more than likely debut in that instead of like the movie straight up. But hey, we didn't know that Knuckles was going to debut in the second movie, and look what happened. So that might happen with the fourth movie, but we'll see. We'll see what they do. Um, so yeah, that's all I'm going to say on that, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are on all that information. Again, live chat is open, super chats are open. If you want to get those on in, whatever you can do, be greatly appreciated. Let's get on to the next topic here, guys. Let's talk about Cyberpunk Jordan's newest video, where he talked about the downfall of ASF, which is known as Archie Sonic Forever. And Archie Sonic Forever is an interesting thing because Cyberpunk Jordan, he did a great job talking about it. But basically, what it was is it was one of the more, I guess you could say, kind of like, I don't know how I can look at it this way, but it was kind of one of the more cohesive, more simplified, cohesive fan continuations, pre-reboot fan continuations, of the official book. Basically pre Genesis wave or Super Genesis wave, if you will, that led into the reboot. So this kind of was in line, like I said, with the pre-reboot status. But the way they did it was basically, as Jordan put it, was they basically essentially started not after 247, but they decided to start around 241 to around and after issue 241 and 242, so that way they can go and do it in their own way, kind of play with it in their own manner, if you will. And each issue basically consisted of about 2 to 3 short stories, to where you would read one story and it would end abruptly, and then you go on to something else, and you're wondering what happened, and then you would finish that story off in the next issue. But basically, they wanted to do it in their own manner, to where they wanted to go in a direction to where where they avoided everything that came afterwards in the official comic, and they just wanted to get straight to the point, as to what Ian Flynn initially wanted to do, or as they conceived it, what could have been done, or how it could have been done. And basically, I read the issues. I liked them. I really did. But the behind the scenes information that Jordan gave, talking about it, I can definitely say that this is a prime example. As I'm just looking at something here, looking at the percentage of my tablet, it's at 36%. Probably have to charge it after this. But the way Jordan perceived it in his review, or not perceived, well, the way I perceived it, I should say, from what Jordan was talking about, is this is just an example that certain teams do not work well together. They don't. Certain members of a roster do not get along good. Because they're all going to have different ideas of how they feel something should go, and that's what it sounded like to me. It sounded like to me like one of the people that was like one of the head people, not in charge, but kind of like doing the storytelling and stuff like that. They had their own idea of where they wanted to take the story. Well, the other ones that initially started had their own idea of where they wanted to go, and so on and so forth. And to me, I think it was just a budding of it was just a budding of different ideas. It was just a budding of one side wanted to do this and another side wanted to do that. And that's just an example of, like, as the old saying goes, too many cooks in the kitchen. Just too many cooks in the kitchen, if you will. And when that happens, you're looking at a disaster. You're looking at an overall disaster, because one person feels like, oh, we should take these chocolates and the candy cane and melt them down into the chocolate and make them into chocolate fondue, and then pour it onto this cookie here, and then you're going to have fondue cookies. And then the other person's like, no, let's just leave it as it is. It's better that way. People don't want a mixture, stuff like that. And it's back and forth. It's like, oh no, we should do this, we should do that. It's like that's what it sounds like to me. It was essentially, again, too many cooks in the kitchen with too many different ideas. And here's the thing: if I was them, and this was the scenario I was in, I would have worked something out. I would have said, okay, I would have told the one person that basically left the team high and dry, as it was described. I would have told them, okay, fine. You do your thing. You do your version. We'll do our version, and we'll see which one is better. And then present them both like that. Just say, you work on your version, we'll work on our version. See what happens, and let the fans decide. Let the fans decide if they like that person's interpretation or these people's interpretation. That's how I feel it should have been done, and everything. But yeah, basically, it's just too many cooks in the kitchen, in my opinion. It's like oil and water, just don't mix. You know, you just gotta always make sure you have the right combination. You have to have the right combination out there to work, as a team. You need to make sure you have the right ingredients, if you know what I mean. And apparently, they didn't have that here. They didn't have it, whatsoever in this equation. Now, again, the story was good. I thought the story was good and everything. But there were some things I did miss initially because apparently I didn't even notice when I read it that there was a Sally Hart Nicole on the back of Nicole's portable that was left behind in the death egg. And apparently, Nicole could partially still communicate, or at least, well, the remnants of that version of Nicole could still communicate and everything as to what was going on. But that was the one thing that I think really got under people's skin. And even Jordan's like, wait a minute, why was this here? And then of course you find out, potentially, the reason for it. And I think that was probably, if you look at some ideas and everything, you look at some ideas, and you can definitely tell that that was one of the ideas that kind of disagreed upon because basically the two people that later on went on to make a fan comic that was very insensual in its manner, a Mega Man fan comic, where basically it was Rock and Roll, who are looked at as siblings in every incarnation they've been in, and yet, the two people, I'm not going to name who they are. You can go watch Cyber's video on that. Basically, they they decided to take that essential sibling relationship and turn it on its head by making them essential to each other, if you know what I mean. And go in areas that basically basically would weird you out in a way, But yeah, it was basically these two people who went on to do that. Apparently, you could probably tell that they were fans of Sally and Nicole, of the Sal Cole relationship, and not a fan of not a fan of the San Sal relationship. Well, the other party probably was, and I think maybe that was the conflicting situation of when they probably found out, I should say, that they were putting that probably into the book, that little indication on the back of the handheld. He, that individual probably was like, no, why would we do that? They were never in a relationship. Sonic and Sally were, and maybe these other two were like, no, we're putting it there because we rather have Sally and Nicole, and Sonic can go off and just be himself because that's how Sega always intended him to be. Or Sonic could be with Amy because it makes more sense, because they're both hedgehogs. I guess I don't know, but yeah, I think that was probably one of the reasons initially, one of the main reasons why that book, why this whole collaboration fell apart. Because again, that's an example of difference of opinions, difference of ideas, and everything. And I think honestly, they should have made that clear. These two individuals should have made that clear to this one individual that, hey, if you're going to help us, here's what we're going to do, and outline to him what they were planning. And what they were planning basically was to have Sally and Nicole hinted at as being an item, and that in the future issues, which they would have done, but they didn't, we would have seen those two get together. Essentially, that's what they should have done. They should have explained it to that individual in that manner so that they would have a better understanding of that situation so that they could decide whether or not they want to be on board with it. And if they are, they can be like, okay, fine. They may not be a fan of it, but you're the guys, you're the ones, trying to put this together. Fine. I'll work within it. I'm not a fan of it, but I'll work within it. But that didn't happen. That didn't happen. And again, that essentially led to the downfall of this comic. Because again, the difference in collaboration. you know and another reason why people felt like it was a downfall wasn't just because of the discombobulated, destructive, partnership that fell apart, if you will, but also because of the other two people always seemingly blocking people who were asking them questions and all that about what they were doing with the comic, as to basically also why they were going in this direction with the Mega Man, insensual comic they were doing and stuff, and that's not a good thing to do. I mean, if you're somebody that likes fan critiqueness or fan opinion, then you need to let them know, the answer, or you need to give them some kind of answer, some kind of response instead of blocking them, because by blocking them, it kind of proves the point that maybe you were the problem and not the other individual, instead of the role reversal, if you know what I mean. But yeah, the Archie Sonic Forever book, I thought was good. I thought it was really good. And I will say this, I've also had my issues with them too, because I think I talked about it one time here on my channel or something to that extent. And I tagged them a couple of times because I wanted to share my critique. I wanted to share my opinions with them. And I ended up getting blocked. So it's like, wait a minute, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just sharing my opinion, sharing my thoughts on your stories, as well as what you're doing. I want to spread the word. But I ended up getting blocked myself. So yeah, it's just one of those situations again to where, you know, when you have, certain cooks in the kitchen, sometimes certain cooks can work well together, they communicate well together to get stuff done. And then there's other cooks that just can't work together, like water and oil, fire and ice. It just, doesn't work unless there's some kind of, understanding, like communication, if you will. And again, I think if they would have communicated that one bit, I think, which probably was one of the reasons of the dissension, the whole, oh, let's put Sally loves Nicole on behind, the Nicole handheld that was left behind in the death egg. you know had they communicated to the other individual that that was the intention they wanted to go in, from, let's say, a romantic standpoint, I think, yeah, they probably would have been understanding of it. They would have accepted it, but they wouldn't. They'd probably make it. I'm trying to find out what I would say. They probably would have made it clear that they weren't a fan of it. We'll put it that way. They weren't truly a fan, but they were willing to accept it for the time being. If that's what they wanted to do. But again, it's about communication, and because the communication wasn't there and it was breaking down, and all parties had different ideas, it's like you basically, blanked yourselves, if you know what I mean. You basically, blanked yourselves in the rear, if you know what I mean, because of not communicating very well with each other, as to what you want, as to what directions you wanted to go in, as well as maybe what certain ships you wanted to bring into the equation, into the story, as well. But yeah, I thought it was a decent continuation and all that, but that's just me. That's just my opinion. And yeah, there are other alternatives. I didn't know about the two. I mean, I knew about Legacy and I know about Archie Sonic Online. Believe me, it's one of the ones I like reading. I didn't know about Blue Streak. I think I'd heard about it, but I didn't really know it was more like SatAM Archie based than anything. But I might look into that. But really, overall, though, I highly recommend checking out Cyberpunk Jordan's video on it. I think you'll be very informative as to what you find out and everything, and maybe you'll find out more on your own as well. So, yeah, I do, like I said, recommend checking it out. I really do. But outside of that, the only other news item is that I could talk about is basically this month was supposed to get Tangle and Whisper debuting into Sonic Racing Crossworld. Ay Ay Ay, the monkey from Super Monkey Ball was supposed to debut. I still locked up. I don't know what the time restraint is on that, but let me know, guys, if you got him already and how that's done. But anyway, that's practically all I can talk about right now. That's all I can really say on everything Sonic. From 150, the infamous 150 from Archie Sonic turning 21, old enough to drink this summer, and turning 20 last summer, to what's planned, what they have in store for the Sonic movies and stuff, and as well as giving my thoughts in response to Cyberpunk Jordan's Archie Sonic Forever video, which I highly recommend you check out. He did a great job on it. But that's all I can say, guys. So until next time, comment down below in the comment section if you like. Thank you all for those that did, did kind of come in here and everything and put the 2 thumbs up. I really appreciate that. Unfortunately, there was no chats, no live chats or super chats. But hey, super thanks are going to be open when this gets rendered later on into tomorrow, because it's like a 10 to 12 hour render, if you will. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys, in the comment section on all the topics I had to say here. I'll probably be splitting this into chapters, so be on the lookout for that, so it makes it more accessible for you guys in the future. But until next time, guys, do me a solid favor, and that's like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video / live stream. And also click on the links in the description and on my YouTube homepage to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube and to support me outside of YouTube as well. But guys, let me know what your thoughts are, and until then, I will talk to you later. You all have a good day, and there will be more content coming. Be on the lookout. It's coming later today.